One of the big problems that we have is our low revenue to GDP ratio. Our revenue to GDP ratio is one of the lowest in the world. This is a perennial problem for us in the last 15 years. Our revenue to GDP ratio, and when I mean revenue, I mean taxation, I mean royalties, what we call PNBP. I'm talking about excise taxes, excise on cigarettes, excise on alcoholic beverage, excises on sweetened beverage like tech bottle. All these things this is a whole, I would say, a panoply of what we call revenue factors. Now, our revenue ratio is only 12.1%. 12.1%. One of the lowest in the world among the big nations. The only other big nation with a lower revenue ratio is Nigeria. In Nigeria, they have a revenue ratio of, Pakistan, Pakistan, 8% a year, and they're bankrupt. I think DBS knows that Pakistan has had to go to the IMF in the last few months. They're basically bankrupt. Why? Because they have a revenue ratio of 8%. Our revenue ratio is not that much better. It's only 12%, but somehow we survive at 12%. Now, the goal of President Prabowo is to reach the same revenue ratio as our neighbor called Cambodia. Cambodia has a revenue ratio today of 18% of GDP. We have another neighbor called Vietnam, whose revenue ratio is 23%. So we have been encouraged by the World Bank, who say that there is no reason why Indonesia cannot perform, the Indonesian government cannot perform as well as Cambodia and Vietnam. So it is the goal of our government to quickly go up to the same level as Cambodia. We believe it will take 4 years to reach the level of Cambodia. Which means what? Which means that Indonesia, with a notional GDP this year of $1.5 trillion, I've been told it's 23,000 trillion rupiahs, $1.5 trillion. By reaching the same level as Cambodia, we should be able to increase our revenues by $90 billion a year. Our revenue ratio is 12%. By going up to Cambodia's ratio, which is basically an increment of 6%, 6% of $1.5 trillion is $90 billion. $19 billion is 1,440 trillion rupiahs. All we need to fund a steady state, to fund the free meal program, is 300 to 400 trillion rupiahs, which means that we will have a surplus of close to 900 trillion rupiahs with which to fund other programs. And that's only reaching Cambodia's level. And I want to qualify my statement by saying that there is no intention from this government to increase the tax rates. The tax rates is different from the tax revenue. The revenue is a completely different concept. So when I mention this, people say, oh, Hashim, you're going to increase our taxes. No, we're not going to increase our taxes. We're going to increase more taxes from more people who are not paying their taxes. And there we already know that our revenue is so low as a percentage of GDP that we will be able to go up to Cambodia and to Vietnam's level by not taxing and increasing the tax rate. In fact, there's already talk of reducing the tax rate to Singapore level. I mean, Singapore is what, 17.5%, is it, 18%? So there's some talk of in fact, incentivizing people by reducing the tax rate. But we want to increase the revenue, the aggregate revenue we want to increase. So what are the implications? The implications is, again, another positive push for growth. We will be able to fund many, many projects. And therefore, I think it's very beneficial to have Pak Rosan here. He's head, I think you're here as CEO of antara, yeah? Not as Minister of Investment. Or for both? You're here as both. Okay, I was told you're here for antara. So all questions about antara, I leave it to you. Yeah. But what I want to say is the Indonesian government will have revenue. The target is for $20 billion of cash from the state budget every year. $20 billion a year, which means, or 18 billion, I think, yeah? Which means over 5 years, antara will have cash of about $90 billion with which to invest. And the idea is basically to invest, to co-invest, yeah, Pak Rosan. If a Singapore company wants to build a power station and is looking for a partner, then antara would be able to partner I think the IRRs are usually for power projects are pretty good. So antara would be the partner of choice. The partner of choice is antara, not Hashim. Yeah? antara would be the partner of choice. And we'll be able to fund projects in a huge scale. If, let's say, that antara is a 50% partner to co-invest with a Singapore investor, other investors, and the 50% would translate to equity of $180 billion, and on a very conservative DBS style, 3-to-1 leverage, we would be able to fund, I would say, $720 billion of projects on a conservative approach. $720 billion of projects to be funded over 5 years. 5 years. And these are, I think, quite conservative estimates. So I think in the time, do I have more time? Or, yeah, how much more time do I have? So I've already talked about what? I've talked about free meals, I've talked about housing, I've talked about downstreaming, and I've talked about internet connectivity. The combination of which I strongly believe will be able to propel this economy beyond 8% a year. I'm very, very convinced. I'm very optimistic. The President, Prabowo, is very optimistic also. This is one of the ways which we'll be able to do this. Yeah? I think the game changer is to increase our revenues. And we will increase our revenues by using artificial intelligence and using IT tools to be able to increase through including electronic taxation, including stoppage of leakages, increasing revenues from stopping manipulation of fuel subsidies, the manipulation of fertilizer subsidies, and also the manipulation of cryptocurrencies and online gambling and so forth. So those are the methods, the tools that we will use to increase revenue in the coming years.